Again, hi everyone. We're going to take a couple more minutes before we get started, and it would really be great if you haven't had a chance to yet, just jump into the chat and say hi to everybody around the food industry, and be sure to let us know where you're chatting in from. We have really good representation on this webinar. We have, most cities and major towns in the U.S. covered, as well as outside of the country as well. And it's all, your brothers and sisters in the food industry with you. But I wanted to get started, pre-started. This is not actually getting started today. Sort of like, I don't know, call it a game or a quiz or a test of some sort. So for years now, we've done these sort of food characters that have become associated with Datassential, where we create these sort of like food puns and turn them into characters. We put them on t-shirts. They're really fantastic. And this is the original one, or actually a variant of the original one. It is obviously a pig dressed up in a hat with a beard, and most of you can probably guess its name. Most of you probably have seen it at this point, but this is our first food character, and his name was Abraham Lincoln. And over the past couple of weeks, we've created a few new ones that we'd like to sort of just, I don't know, like beta test, I guess, right here, because when you're involved in the design process, you know what the thing is already. So when it's produced, you know what it is. But we don't really know if people will instantly recognize what these things are supposed to be. So they're meant to be things that make you think a little bit, but once you figure it out in your head, it makes sense. And wanted to see how many of these you all as a community can get as we rifle through them. So please use chat. And if you've already seen any of these before, don't guess, because we don't want to ruin for anybody else. But if you haven't, take a look and see if you can figure out who these other characters are. So the first one is the original. That's Abraham Lincoln. We're going to try a couple more now. Can I, Mike and Claire, can I ask you to monitor chat to see how we're doing on guesses? Mm-hmm. All right, so sure. Here's the first one.
Oh yeah, people immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
Immediately?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any wrong guesses in there?
I don't see any.
So I think we have a winner then, right? If people get it immediately and
Yeah.
no one's guessing wrong, that's pretty good. Okay, so this one's good. All right, how about?
Well, you got to say what it is.
Oh yeah, Mike, do the pleasure.
It was Toast Malone, like Post
Malone. How about this one?
This one originally, I didn't get it when we posted it in the
it's a little hard
Slack.
because there's a couple ways you can interpret it.
Yeah.
I think.
I think people are getting, there's a few ways people are going, but I think people are getting it.
Yeah, we did this for the Vibe Adult Beverage Conference just a couple of weeks ago. So this is Samuel Ale Jackson, or you could say Samuel L. Jackson. I think both are acceptable answers. All right, how about this one?
Oh, immediately Ryan Barnett got it.
Yeah, so this one works. So this is our beloved Oprah Ginfrey, of course, and just a couple more. How about this one?
Wow, Ryan Barnett is on it.
All right, so I think these actually sort of work. That is Nicolas Cage, and I've been sort of chastised, derided, questioned for my continued promotion of the Nicolas Cage movie Pig, which I will continue to promote because it is fantastic and it's about food. If you haven't checked out Pig, I think you'd stream it for free on Amazon Prime Video or something like that now. So go check out Pig. I think we have one last one, and this one is actually my favorite. And it's this one over here. Are we getting good answers in?
Yep. Everybody's got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, of course, Morgan Freeman. And I would ask all of you to just use chat to vote. If you were to wear one of these proudly as a t-shirt, which one would you want it to be? Is it Smorgan, Pickles, Oprah Winfrey, Samuel L. Jackson, or Toast Malone? Vote for your favorite, and we'll probably think about doing something with it. Okay, as a reminder, to use chat, make sure you're choosing either all panelists and attendees or everyone, so that everyone can see your comments and not just the four of us that are on the panel today. And remember, this is all about everyone's participation. We're going to talk about a few different topics today, leading with the mindset of the modern operator, but talking about LTOs and sort of a potpourri of things that are important. But your input, your feedback, your commentary, your observations are just as valuable as the content itself. So please engage, use chat, anything on your mind, just go for it and make sure you share it with everyone. To get started, I want to talk about a few new things that you'll find in Report Pro. I think many, if not most of you are already Report Pro users, so that is fantastic. As a reminder, we have new content going up virtually daily, over 1,000 reports that you'll find in there. And here's some of the new ones that you may want to check out if you haven't had a chance to already. We have a short read on some of the latest economic indicators that may be of interest to you, that should be of interest to all of us. What's happening with the latest numbers that we've seen with GDP and inflation, and what is this likely to mean for the food industry and the restaurant business. There's a wonderful series of reports on the drinker journey that actually, if you're either in the adult beverage space or if you are an operator that serves adult beverages, you got to check it out. There is so much information here about just what is happening in the world of adult beverage. And then we actually have individual reports for different types of alcohol as well. It is everything you need to know, and it's also forward-looking with regard to the latest trends and where this industry is going to be a few years from now. So that's worth checking out if you do anything at all with adult beverage. And we have some great content on what the future of fast food looks like as well. So check that out, and check out, again, some of the 1,000+ other reports you'll find in Report Pro, and it's all in there right now. So to get actually started, we're going to rely on Mike once again to tell us what the heck is going on around this wacky world of food. Mike?
Absolutely. So this is always our chance just to look at some of the cool, innovative, trendy things happening in the world of food. And I think weirdly, just to get us started, the ice cream truck is making a comeback. So I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago on the webinar, we talked about one of the robots, the autonomous robots that will actually traverse parks and beaches as like a little miniature ice cream truck. We've seen a couple independent operators across the country operating their own ice cream trucks. There's actually a dog treat truck in Chicago that goes from dog park to dog park, and they pull up to the dog parks. But so this is the latest one that we saw. So Unilever, they're actually taking a virtual brand that they have, which is the ice cream shop that you can order from online, and they're turning it into, I don't want to say a brick and mortar, because I mean, whatever the brick and mortar version, a wheels and windshield, version of a brick and mortar is. But so this is an on-demand ice cream truck that actually comes directly to your door. You get on the app, you call it to the door. There is a driver, but you never interact with the driver. It's the rest of it is fully automated. So you go out there and you get your ice cream. It's only operating in Los Angeles right now, too, this summer.
Wait, it looks like this?
It looks like the van in the middle there. The things on the outside are just
pint of ice cream?
No, I think that's just for fun.
Oh, just looks like a van. Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
it just looks like a van. Yeah,
like the Oscar Mayer Wiener.
Yeah,
I did see the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. Is it called a truck or mobile the other day? And they must have updated it at some point.
oh, it's so fancy.
It's really cool and modern.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you sort of want to live in that thing.
It's really
awesome.
nice. Yeah.
Great.
And then in other retail news, I don't know, we get all these emails, we get all these, new product announcements. And like over time, you start to see these little trends happening. And the one that I just started to notice recently is the number of Whey products that are geared towards other demographics. So I feel like, previously you would have associated Whey with like bodybuilders or, like your friends in college who are trying to like really beef up. But just in the past few weeks, there's been a couple of launches. So now there's Whey protein for kids that comes from Healthy Heights. And so it's a kids protein mix. They have a few different flavors. They targeted a little bit more for growing kids, so it's the protein that they need to grow as opposed to like toddler bodybuilders. And then you even see some of the whey protein encroaching on the plant-based space. So what's the brand? I believe it's Perfect Day. So they developed an animal-free whey alternative. So the one on the left there is their brand. So it's California Performance Company, which they're launching, which is Animalist Whey. And then there's a different company that uses their Animalist Whey, which is Nutrieve's Mooless. So I just think it's interesting. I actually had a friend that she's somebody that you would least think to be, using a whey supplement. But she saw a TikTok that was recommending like a particular brand, and she just started using whey. So just kind of like an interesting little trend I think is popping up.
It's actually, so I mean, this is traditionally a product you'd find at a GNC or something, and we're seeing it in really cool progressive stores now instead. What was that like nursery thing, like Little Miss Muffet? And I remember I remember thinking like, what is a Tuffet? Like I didn't know what curds or whey were at the time. I still don't know what a Tuffet is.
And then moving over to food service. So this is a brand that is making its way over from the UK. They're doing a pop-up in New York, and then they're going to open 3 fast casuals with the goal of actually opening, I believe it's something like 20 or 30 operations in the country. But it's a plant-based burger chain called Meat Burger. Although they don't only do burgers, they do plant-based chicken, plant-based seafood. It's all made in-house. And I think there's 2 things that are interesting about them. Number one, they're calling themselves a part of the plant-based 3.0 movement. So if plant-based 1.0 was like the veggie burgers that we saw in like the 80s and 90s, and plant-based 2.0 was, some of those, animal analogs that we saw in the past few years. They say this is moving in that little bit more natural direction. It feels a little bit less, chemically, a little bit less processed. When we looked at the 2022 trends, if you remember from January, we asked that question, do consumers want to see more, natural fruits and vegetables and produce kind of in their own natural forms, or do they want to see some of the analogs? And 60% of consumers said that they wanted to see, the celebration of produce, and 40% said they wanted to see the analogs. So I think this is a brand that's kind of taking that into account. The other thing that they're doing is they're using the food service brand to gain awareness for a future launch that they want to do at retail. So they want to put the brand in retail in the future.
What is the product made of? Is it?
It's pea proteins, I know, are in there, quinoa, and then I think they use some fruit extract. So
it's a veggie blend of.
Is it? Yeah.
It's weird. Do you think it was intentional? They chose a font for the logo where Meat Burger almost looks like Meat Burger.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Maybe that's like a subliminal, like, I don't know.
I think a lot of people might have seen this one because I noticed it because Dolly Parton posted it on her Instagram. But I'm sure everybody's seen that Taco Bell is bringing the Mexican pizza back. Well, now they've announced as part of the marketing initiative and push to release it, they're going to perform a full musical on TikTok, and it's featuring some big names. So Dolly Parton is going to be a part of it. Doja Cat is going to be a part of it. Both of them had said previously that they love the Mexican pizza. They actually, they have 2 Grammy Award-winning songwriters who are going to write the musical. So it's coming up on May 26th. You can watch the full musical. And it's, I believe that's a couple days before the full launch of the Mexican pizza coming back to the menus itself.
What is it, like a 20-minute event type of thing?
I don't know. I haven't seen how long it's going to be. I can't imagine it's like a full 2-hour one.
Oh, fascinating.
When this one, we have to play the video. I feel like you only get it if you play the video of it.
So how do I play the video?
If you just press the center of it, usually the little pop-up.
Oh,
or maybe
I think here. I think it blocked the video because it thought it was potentially dangerous.
Maybe it is. Maybe. But this is what people might have seen too. So you kind of get the idea here. So this is a guy, his name is Matt Benedetto, and his whole thing is he creates unnecessary inventions. And his latest one was this, which he calls the Burrito Bumper. And it's basically a funnel, and you put a small soft shell taco or tortilla shell under it, and you eat your burrito over it, and then all of the fillings that, you know, inevitably fall out of the burrito fall into that second taco. And then when you're done with your burrito, you have an extra little taco as your dessert. So it's so popular. Like, I mean, like most of his inventions are ridiculous. Nobody's going to purchase them. It feels like there's almost no way that somebody's not going to make it. Like everybody posts like, I want this. Yeah, it's so funny.
It's the meal that keeps on giving. Yeah, that is a great idea. Oops.
And then this next one. So this, they posted about this on the Spoon, but I don't know, you know, we've covered the sharing economy a lot, but one area I don't think we've necessarily covered it is in home appliances. You know, I mean, we share scooters, we share cars now, but this is a company called Tulu. They're out of both Israel and New York, and they do excuse me, these kind of like large form or small format stores in either apartment buildings or in office buildings. And you get these various modules. So you can see on the right-hand side there, there's things you can purchase. There's a little freezer, there's a fridge, but everything on the left-hand side there is rentable. So if you're living in that building, you can rent all of these things. And that includes kitchen appliances. So you can see in the corner there, there's like an air fryer there. And when I was living in, you know, small apartments, like I would not purchase things specifically because I didn't have room for them. I still don't have room for an air fryer and don't have one. But so I think this is really interesting and a really great idea.
Wait, okay, so the store buys these, or these are other people's items that they're running?
No, so this, yeah, so Tulu is the company that owns all these products, and you just rent it from them. Yeah.
I mean, an air fryer is only like $100 or something, and it's like,
but they're so big. They're so, yeah.
That seems like a lot of work, right? You gotta like bring a thing with you. It's huge.
But that's the thing.
Items. Yeah.
You don't have, yeah, like if you don't have room for an air fryer, that's why I don't have an air fryer on my counter, because it's too big.
Huh. Fascinating.
And then I think we're seeing a lot of these kind of built-in scale kitchen appliances. There was a little coaster that would actually help you to create a cocktail by measuring each ingredient. And you know, they've come and gone. They haven't really hit the mainstream. But this was a really interesting one that just hit, I believe, nearly $35,000 as part of their Indiegogo campaign. And it's called the 47 cutting board. And so it's a digital cutting board that has a scale underneath it. There's 3 different cutting boards on top. So there's the main bamboo cutting board. There's an antibacterial plastic cutting board that you can see there. So there's no cross-contamination. And then there's one, it's a defrosting tray that says that it defrosting 6 times faster, and you can actually put it in the oven. But the cool thing about it is as you're chopping, you say that you're finished chopping, and it not only weighs those ingredients, but it tells you how many calories are in those ingredients. And then you press the plus button and you add it to your meal. And at the end of, you know, all your prep, you can see what the full caloric breakdown of your meal is, which I think is interesting.
And it knows the number of calories because you tell it what you're cutting.
What you're cutting, yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. So it can only do that for produce and well, I guess you're not going to cut up prepared meals.
Cut up, yeah. When there's an app too, so I know you can add, if you're adding up prepared ingredient, you can add that.
If they got into a place where they had a camera and it would just auto detect
automatically,
and that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
Right?
And then just a couple more here. This is my favorite one. So this is Google's Little Signals. And so it's basically a way for them to come up with ambient computer technology that informs you of whatever you need to be informed of. So right now, you know, most of the notifications we get are either through a screen, you know, probably on our phone, pop-ups coming all the time, or noises, you know, buzzers and alarms constantly. And so they're trying to think through ways that are less invasive, that just feel like part of your environment. They came up with this group of them as the first pass, and it is very conceptual. So one of them is literally a puff of air is puffed out, and that would, you know, inform you of something. Another one casts a shadow on the wall, and you can actually like have the shadow move as things change. But some of it, when you think about like, so there's the one kind of in the upper right there, which is like all the little cylinders in that kind of white platform there. And some of the use cases they were talking about are each of those could maybe represent a room in your house and whether the lights are on in that room. And so immediately you just look at it and you see, oh, the lights are on in, a room downstairs. Or maybe one of those drops down for each minute that, your pizza is about to be delivered. And so it's something that just like lives and exists in your house and allows you to kind of glean information from your ambient environment, which I think we're going to see more of in the future. I think there's an example on the next screen here of something that already uses this, which is this is the Canary fresh air monitor. And so it uses that canary in a coal mine concept, but you put it on the wall, and if your air is bad quality, it flips over and I hate to say dies, but it dies. And so, it's not a screen notification, it's not an alarm, it's just something that lives in your space. It looks really beautiful, actually. And if you think through like the use cases for this type of notification, back of house, in a restaurant where there's screens everywhere and we're adding, new alarms all the time, maybe there are other ways that we can impart information. They were talking about in cars where you can't be on a screen. Are there other ways of, notifying people? Somebody mentioned maybe like a tap on your shoulder that you should, take a turn here if you want to go to McDonald's or whatever it is. So I think this is an interesting area of notifications and computing that we're going to see a lot more of in the future.
That's fascinating. So we think that we're going to see like an explosion of these types of, not just from Google, but from all sorts of companies. And
yeah, I think, now that we have the Internet of Things and so many things in our houses are connected, I think, ways of notifying people that aren't so, focused on our computer or our smartphones is going to be much bigger in the future.
Oh, fascinating. Very cool.
And then the last two here, so, we talk about 3D meat all the time, but so Chef Marco Pierre White, he announced that he's going to add 3D meat from Redefined Meat to 23 more of his restaurants. So he uses them, you can see it in the picture here, in a steak dish. He uses it in a burger. He uses it in a ragu that he's adding to the spring menu. He says he eats Redefined Meat twice a week now, that he absolutely loves it. But I think we're seeing, years ago when we saw big names like David Chang adding, some of the plant-based meats to the menu, and everybody was, really interested, what are these cool chefs doing with these bleeding, plant-based meats? That's what we're seeing now with some of these 3D meats and some of these, cell-based meats.
For folks that aren't totally familiar with it, what is 3D meat?
So it's printed by a food printer. So you can actually kind of see in that steak there how a food printer might actually print each of those kind of striations in the meat itself there.
This steak was printed from a printer, and
from a printer, yeah.
And what is the actual substance it's printing? What's the?
I guess the best way, the way to call it is like a meat goop is kind of what goes into the printer.
And you could actually go into his restaurant and get this now?
And get it, yeah. It's coming to the spring menu at 23 locations in the UK.
Are there reviews posted online or anything?
I haven't seen any, no. I mean, he obviously really loves it, but I haven't seen any consumer.
That's interesting because this is supposed to be like almost the holy grail of 3D food printing is when you can actually do like a cut of steak or something. So, wow, it looks like it's here.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But I know the high-end chefs really love it because of the level of control that they have. I want the meat, to be X%. I want the fat to be X%. I think this one, the picture kind of shows, it looks a little bit like corned beef to me. So I don't know if it's fully like replicating just the,
but
the fillet.
Actually, the ink is actually meat, right?
It's
yeah. That's fascinating. Huh. Which brings us to this.
And I mean, this is just kind of a fun one to end on. But we've talked about this in the past, whether, people would bring back animals that were extinct specifically to eat them. But YouGov did a survey and they asked a whole battery of questions about bringing extinct animals back. And I think the interesting thing, one, most, US consumers are not for bringing extinct animals back through technology. I think everybody's watched Jurassic Park at this point. It's still a fairly high percentage, like 32% of consumers are for it. And when you ask about specific animals, that it changes from animal to animal. So I don't know, you guys, you saw the slides. Did you see which animal US consumers said that they would be most willing to bring back from extinction? Giant tortoises. So I think they just seem like so slow and friendly they can't like kill us.
Not
So
the
that
food,
one's
you mean
okay.
to bring back as living creatures or to eat?
As living creatures, yeah. So if we have the technology to bring back in, and there are giant tortoises that still exist in the
Wait, wait, wait,
Galapagos,
wait.
but
But we have the technology to bring back extinct animals.
if we do, yeah, the
Oh,
question is, if we do,
Okay, I
would
was
you
gonna
be
say
supportive of it? Yeah.
I missed a whole important part of our history.
And so that was the one that they were most willing to bring back. Passenger pigeons were number two. And then the animal that, consumers are least willing to bring back, if we do have the technology in the future, is the T-Rex. Only 10% of consumers said that they
All
want the
companies
T-Rex.
that are looking to bring back extinct animals as food, right? We talked about it before. Was T-Rex on that list?
I don't know. I don't remember. Yeah, surely. I feel
And you
like
said passenger pigeon?
yeah.
What is that? A pigeon you could ride? What is that?
Apparently, that you put a message on, and that it was a carrier
Oh,
pigeon
carrier
is another
pigeon.
name. Yeah.
I thought you meant like a 3,000-pound pigeon you could ride like a horse. Okay.
I mean, that might be useful too.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. Fascinating as always, mind-blowing. We're going to shift gears to looking at some information from a series of reports that Anne's going to take us through called Pulse. And maybe, Anne, you can give us a little bit of a background on what Pulse actually is.
Yeah, sure. Real quick. It's basically, everything and anything you'd want to know about operators. It actually comes in a few different types of reports. I won't get into the details. They're all on Report Pro, but we do kind of one massive annual report. We've actually been doing it since 2014. And we look at every single segment, restaurants, on-site and retail. We look at the industry overall. We look at differences between segments. We also do deep dives into individual segments so you can understand those operators. And then we also do a monthly kind of short check-in where we kind of examine some key issues and then also tackle kind of whatever hot button issues folks are talking about the industry. So it's a very all-encompassing product in Report Pro that kind of covers everything you need to know about operators.
So let's dive into the operator mindset. And we should note that this is essentially street level operators exclusive of the biggest national chains that we look at it in a different way. But what do we learn, Anne?
Yeah, so one thing we think about when we look at Pulse is I think sometimes we forget that operators, like it's their people, right? These are people making decisions. And so we kind of look at like, who are these people? And this probably isn't too much of a surprise that it tends to be a bit more of a male dominated industry than female. But there's some interesting skews within segments. So, full service restaurants tend to be a little heavier skewed towards men, and same with supermarket prepared departments. Females less well represented, but there are a few outliers. So K-12 decision makers actually overwhelmingly are women, and then we see more women in healthcare too. So especially long-term care, those sort of top line decision makers tend to be women.
That's pretty amazing, right? I mean, you have a 70-30 male split in mid-scale and an 87-13 female split in K-12. So it really does change from one segment to the next.
Yeah, so another thing that, maybe we think about is sort of intuitive and also sort of surprising is just how much experience these decision makers have. So, 40% have 30 or more years of experience. I think it sort of makes sense if you start to think about it, like, food service is a lot of people's very first job, right? You start, in high school waiting tables or whatever it is. But I know we kind of forget that. I know if we think about like, my own professional experience or those around me, 30 years is a lot of time. So, these decision makers really are experts in kind of what they're doing. They know a lot, which can certainly provide challenges for those of us who are trying to sell into them or, show them new and creative things. Like they've seen a lot and they're pretty entrenched in sort of the industry already.
Yeah, if you're a food service manufacturer or distributor and trying to sell into the operator, and these are decision makers that we're seeing feedback from here, the ones that actually decide what products to buy and which products, which sources to use. I mean, that's amazing. 40% have been in the industry already for 30 years, right? Only 10% have less than 10 years of experience, right? So anyone you sell to virtually across the board is highly experienced and has probably seen a lot of stuff before. And sometimes like we get this very internal centric view where, you're working on a new product or initiative or a marketing campaign, and it feels really new and fresh to you and your internal team. It might not to the operator because they've seen 30 years of stuff already, right? So you really have to do something exceptional for it to come off as new. The other thing to think about is, look, we're in some interesting economic times right now. The vast majority of operators that are buying products now made it through the 2008 financial crisis, right? They're well within that period of time. So this will be like familiar territory for many of those customers that you're reaching out to.
And another sort of baseline, another sort of baseline thing we look at Impulse is, where do operators buy from? Again, just sort of trying to understand that food service landscape. And again, probably no major surprises to folks here. Broadliners obviously dominate, 90% of operators using. But we may forget that, if you look down the list, obviously, a little bit smaller, right? About a third are working with local farms. But operators are definitely using multiple sources, right? I think that's sort of one of the key takeaways in terms of, sourcing that they're using, right? So they're definitely pulling from multiple places. If you look at the share of purchases, obviously the bulk of it is coming from those broadliners, and we see much smaller percentages across the other sources. But again, that can vary a lot by segment, right? So local farms probably, much larger play for, say, fine dining than, say, a C-store, right? So these are kind of industry averages, and there's a lot of variation within segment here too.
Yeah, all these different places you could buy product from now become super important. Where, with the supply chain issues and, a restaurant tries to order something from their distributor, it may not always be available. Sometimes they have to look someplace else to find it. So they are going to these other venues, whether it's a club store or a cash and carry store. They're not buying the majority of their stuff there, but almost a majority are at least going to those places. So again, here's another message for the food service manufacturers out there. Imagine you have a product that's being sold into that operator and they've been buying your product loyally for some period of time. Great, they're a reliable end customer. If all of a sudden your product is, let's say, not available through the distributor they order from, they might go to a club store or a cash and carry store and look for some sort of substitute on an emergency basis. And if it's not your product that's there, they might consider a different one. And if that product does pretty well for them, they might even consider switching to that in the long run as well. So I think the important thing is to note that, yeah, most business is done through broadliners, but there are trial opportunities in all these other channels as well. And especially today, they become important.
Yeah, and if you look here, so this, we actually kind of examined that, Jack. We kind of looked at, so pre-COVID versus, today, 2022, where we're seeing, and no major shifts, things haven't been turned on their head. But we do see a little bit of a shift kind of away from, that single source broadliner and a little tick up in some of these other sources. And I think, to your point, Jack, we've had a lot of changes in both what operators are purchasing, right? They're getting more packaging, or, even buying like individually wrapped things that maybe weren't on their, normal order list prior to COVID. And, how much of that's going to kind of stick around versus coming back, right? They've gotten used to some of these new habits and, picking up a smaller pack size at a cash and carry instead of, taking up that inventory space from a big broadliner delivery. So we're definitely seeing a little bit of a shift there. It'll be interesting to see kind of what sticks around and where operators kind of revert back to pre-COVID.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. It's a small shift. It's not a major one, but what we don't see in this particular slide is, are the brands that operators are buying, are those changing in some way? Because like you might go and just make that emergency purchase at the club store. Maybe you end up sticking with that brand in the long run, and that becomes when you start buying through your broadliner afterwards. So there's more happening behind the scenes. But in terms of where people are actually buying product overall, COVID did not really move this terribly much. We're almost at the same levels we were pre-COVID. But perhaps more importantly, just to look at what operators are worried about or thinking about. What do we see, Ann?
Yeah, so once we sort of like figure out who they are, how do they make decisions? What's on their mind? And, kind of looking at this list, the short thing, the big takeaway is a lot, right? So, we kind of look at this list, 90% food costs, 83% labor costs. So nothing sort of super surprising here in terms of, what's weighing heavily on operators' minds. I'm curious, one of these, and I'm going to kind of give a hint, one of the sort of top 5 really jumped up compared to just last year in 2021. I don't know if anyone wants to wager a guess in chat as to what that is. But, a lot of these things sort of feel, we're driving customer traffic. They're things that, kind of make sense for operators. But one of these really jumped up a lot compared to last year. And I think it was sort of a new thing that operators are thinking about.
So which of the top 5 items increased the most since last year?
Yes.
Are,
Yep.
are people venturing guesses in
Yeah,
chat?
couple people are getting it. Yep.
And the
You want
answer
to go to the
is,
next slide, Jack?
oh, there we go.
Yep. Employee retention, yes. So this used to be very much sort of like a middling issue for operators. It was, kind of in there, but it wasn't top of mind, right? It wasn't kind of keeping them awake day to day. And we saw a huge jump here from just last year in sort of that, level of importance to operators. And I think, no surprise to any of us, right? The Great Resignation impacted, everyone, and food service, a notoriously high, turnover industry already. Obviously, that impact is huge. We all know, hiring a new worker is much more expensive than, maintaining our existing workforce. And as operators are really sort of focusing on various issues, employee retention is really top of mind from them right now in a new way compared to some of those other factors that have been, have long weighed on their business.
So, we see this pretty clearly in all the data that we collect on what's happening with labor. This is from our 5 in Focus series that you'll find in Report Pro as well. I mean, basically the vast majority of operators are having trouble maintaining their staff, right? 36% say it's a major struggle, 44% it's a minor struggle. Only 4% say that their staffing is a source of strength for them. So 80% of operators collectively are having trouble with staffing, and we see restaurants doing some interesting things, right? I mean, and what do we find here?
Yeah, so like Noodles and Company, they have this whole, they're calling it uncommon goodness. And it's part of building a broader company culture, it has to do with like the food they're offering, how they're sourcing all kinds of stuff. And with that comes a bunch of sort of really detailed employee benefits. They've got sort of an immigration reimbursement program. They'll like reimburse you for pet care. And, in addition to sort of all the regular sort of 401k leave type stuff, certainly operators are just paying more, right? So we're seeing, labor costs are kind of obviously a key issue, and part of that's because they really are paying their workers more. And also just other
pet care.
What's that?
They'll pay you back for pet care? That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so expensive.
Right?
Like we had to leave town for a couple of weeks, and we found a place that would off Rover that would take care of our 2 cats. It was $44 a day per cat. So it was like $88 a day. It's like the cost of a hotel room almost, right? It adds up. They'll actually pay for that? That's amazing.
Well, I don't know if they'll pay for all of it, Jack. I don't know if, it's made, I don't know, like whether it's like a small portion of your pet care or what the, yeah, exactly.
The one at the bottom is the craziest though.
Yeah. So there's it's a restaurant group in Colorado, Denver, that's they've created a whole like wellness program. They've hired a wellness director, and they'll do on-site therapy for their employees. So, again, just like really focusing on kind of existing workers, making them happy, their wellness, overall well-being. Operators, I think, are really thinking about much more than they have in previous years.
Is this to combat like the abusive customers that sometimes come in, or why do you need a therapist? I mean, I guess we all need therapists, but it's just fascinating that they would offer one. That's pretty cool. Yeah, fast food therapy.
Yep.
So one thing that we saw too is if you really ask operators, hey, we know you're thinking of a lot of different things, but we really need to like really sort of think and rank things. So if we ask you just, pick the ones that truly come top of mind, you do see a little bit more spread. And number one, by far, despite the major increase we see in concerns around labor and retention, as of today, the number one thing is rising food cost. And this is obviously accelerated by inflation. If you look at the top line CPI numbers, with our number was 8.3 yesterday, that actually trails the producer price index, and often trails by a very significant margin the actual increases in food costs that operators are seeing in many categories, especially proteins, for instance, which we all know have just skyrocketed. So that is weighing heavily on their minds. And I mean, you see this pretty clearly too in the data that you're about to share, Ann, on just how many more people are concerned about these things. We're seeing an increase year over year.
Yeah. I mean, every year we all complain about how things cost more, right? So, we always see sort of a high number of operators saying, their labor costs are increasing and their food costs are increasing. But we've never seen such a huge jump as we have right now. So, over, three quarters are seeing an increase in their labor costs, and, nearly 90% an increase in their food costs over a year prior. So, certainly really impacting operators right now, and they're noticing it. Yeah.
So that is the environment that we exist in. Operators are doing some interesting things, a wide variety of things. Half have already raised their menu prices as a result of rising food costs and inflation. And of those that haven't yet raised their menu prices, the majority are at least considering it. And even among those that have already raised their menu prices, many are considering yet another further price increase to keep pace with their costs just going up and up. Menu sizes have been reduced in many cases, right? Focusing on items that might be a little bit more profitable, or at the very least making their menu a little bit less complex so they can manage all their costs. And 43% have reduced their hours of operation, right? This is in response not just to inflation, but to labor shortages. We've probably all been to that restaurant that has the note on the door saying, sorry, we closed 3 hours earlier these days because we just don't have the staff that can tend to our restaurants. So the market is changing, at least at the restaurant level, in terms of how they're responding to the economic challenges that we have. But I actually want to ask all of you a question, and this is a simple yes, no. 8.5 was the headline inflation number for March that we saw, and then yesterday we saw April's number at 8.3, which was actually lower. And my question for you is, do you think that we've actually hit a high on inflation? Has inflation hit its peak? Is it going to go higher, or is each subsequent number going to be less than 8.3? So it's interesting, right? I mean, we feel it right now, but on the one hand, we did see a downtick after many months of uptick. So is the downtick the beginning of a reversal of the trend, or is it just a little kink in an otherwise upward sloping line? This might be almost like a Rorschach test, right? Or, are people half empty or half full, types of personalities on this particular topic? What do you, Mike and Claire, what do you all think our voting looks like?
I mean, if you judge it by the comments, we're a very pessimistic group.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's take a look. So this is actually striking, perhaps not surprising, but striking to me. 84% of us think that the number will go up. So let's lock in that vote, and we will revisit this each month as the new inflation data gets revealed, and we'll see if that holds true or not. If we had a perfect crystal ball on that, we'd probably be in the stock market. So we'll see. Now, I think it is interesting. This is a restaurant near me, and this is remarkable, right? I mean, they actually just straight up said, if you can read this line over here, please ask a crew member what the price is currently for your desired item. Like, we're not even gonna bother trying to keep up to date with printing new menus or repricing things. We're just gonna assume that every price on our menu is wrong. And if you really care how much it costs, please ask us and we'll let you know what the current price is. Here's another place. You're seeing this at everything from hole in the wall, QSR, independent pizza places to casual dining places. But I think one pizza place that I found, they charge market price for chicken wings now. The place near me does the same thing. I asked him, I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, our prices got so crazy and so unpredictable that we just want market price. I'm like, and I'm thinking that probably doesn't actually help the sale of your chicken wings, because that's almost a scary thing to see, right? I mean, I don't know, when you guys see market price on a menu, like, to me, I sort of feel like if you have to ask how much it costs, right, you're sort of putting yourself down a little bit, like, you're like, oh, can I actually afford this? And it's sort of embarrassing. So I feel like that doesn't help the sale of it, but I guess it helps protect them from taking a loss on product, which is just as important. But I think we'll continue to see more of this. What do we learn, though, just from, overall from all we've seen on operators, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing with operators, they're sort of taking care of themselves right now. So, it's trying times, I think, is sort of the sad moral of the story, right? These labor costs, inflation, it's painful right now. And so they're really focused on kind of streamlining, again, those smaller menus, shorter hours. And so, anything we can do to help make their life easier, right? I feel like, again, we've all, as like a society, we're more focused on our well-being, on, finding joy in the things we do. And so any of those like little things we can do to kind of improve that for operators is really what's going to resonate right now.
Yeah, and I think you've already seen it, like, convenience focused products, things that are a little bit more speed scratch than traditional scratch, things that are a little bit more prepared, that don't require as much, skilled labor to make back of house. I think the market probably continues to move in that direction while we have the labor shortage that we're currently seeing. But with that, I wanted to just, how much, I think we could probably be so far over on time. Where are we on time right now? I don't have my clock.
About 1:40. You're about 45 minutes in, Jack. So
oh no, okay. So we're gonna try to go fast. Claire, I think you've turned into the Matt Damon of this webinar, because I think you keep getting pushed off as we run out of time on these. We may have to fast forward on value, but let's see how far we can get. So I wanted to share some quick information on what's been happening with launches of new items at chain restaurants and LTOs. This is sort of what it looks like for the past, 5 years or so. This line represents the number of new menu items, whether it's an LTO or permanent new menu item, just new launches on menus at the US's top chain restaurants. You can see in the pre-COVID period, on average, we're seeing something in the neighborhood of 400 new items per month at America's top chains. Once we got into the first early part of COVID, that basically dropped by 50% to 200 and change. Then we started going back up to 315. And for the past period, we've been sitting around 340 or so. And if you sort of do the math, that means that right now, chain menu launches are about 86% of where they were pre-COVID. So we've largely recovered in terms of our speed of innovation, but we haven't fully recovered just yet. If we look inside of our scores platform, which, as you know, is an examination of everything that America's chains launch, as well as what consumers think of those items, we see something pretty interesting, because one of the measures we have in scores is uniqueness. And the fear that we'd always had is that the industry's response to COVID would be to focus exclusively on traditional items and shut down the innovation pipeline. But the opposite, in large part, has actually happened. Since COVID, the average uniqueness level, as perceived by consumers, of all the items that are launched at chain restaurants, has actually continued an upward trend. So I think the message and the industry has really sort of gotten behind this notion of let's make interesting stuff for consumers, because that's what gets them off their couches and into the restaurant. And if you look too at the types of dishes that are being launched on chain restaurant menus each month, you can look at what the activity is over the past 3 months. So 17.7% of all new items in LTOs the last 3 months have been non-alcoholic beverages. Then you can look at what that number was pre-COVID. And if you look at the difference in those, you can see what the change is, right? So what are we doing today versus pre-COVID, basically? And I wanted to call attention to this one line item here for combo and value items. And I think this is actually pretty encouraging. We're at a point where it's very, very possible that many chains will say, hey, we need to do more value items because of inflation, because consumers are hurting and their dollar doesn't go as far. So let's address that. But luckily, we haven't yet gotten to the point where that has just overwhelmed what the menu pipeline looks like, that we haven't sort of said, we're just going to go straight to a value and discounting strategy, which I think would be catastrophic for brands in the long run. We're still at a fairly healthy level. And to put it in context, this is, for some reason, to put it in context, we should have a chart coming up momentarily when my Zoom unfreezes that shows historically what the percentage of new value items are each month over the past several years. Let me see if I can X out and restart my screen share. So this might be one of those times, guys, where if you have the slides, if you want to put them up, and you want to do us the honor. But basically, if you look historically, there was a period in time back in 2008, 2009, where more than 1 in 3 new items on a menu at chains were value items, discounted items, promos of some sort, price promotions. We haven't done that again. We're at like 3 or 4% right now, not like 37, 38% that we saw back then. Now, I think that 3 or 4% number is going to increase for sure, but we don't want it to get into like the 20s or 30s, right? We don't want to be back at that 2009 level that we see over here. So if you want to engage in price promotions, For sure, you may do it. You may have to do it in some cases, but let that not be your actual strategy for your broader menu. The innovation stuff is what keeps people coming back. So Claire, could I ask us to maybe click through a little bit? So actually, that's a pretty good seg because you're going to talk to us about value.
Yeah, and I can drive, so that'll work. So we'll go into value, and we just saw that share information. And this is a little bit of a throwback, which I had probably too much fun doing because this was when I started at Datassential. I was an analyst during the 2009-2008 era. The text is super small here, but the point is that none of us want to go back to the land of figuring out who can wrap a chicken tender in a tortilla and sell it for $1.49 again. Nobody wants to do that again. I don't think that's the right direction to go into. So we're going to talk about some other thoughts on where we can head. So this is actually, I looked at the past 3 months in our scores data to see, what are the top scoring value items? What's kind of hitting? We're used to seeing your classic 99-cent items, and this doesn't look that much more exciting, I admit, but when you think about it, it actually is. So we have our nacho fries, which despite being a reoccurring item and having slowly creeped up with the times and price point, they still have a great value because they have that anticipation, I would say. And then this fresh rice medley seemed kind of random to me, but I guess it makes sense. There's some value in kind of that freshness and something else, and it's still a higher price point as far as a side. The one I think is really interesting is this shrimp taco, simply because that $2.50 price point is actually far higher than a couple other taco items, particularly seafood, that came out during that time frame. But I think that consumers are comparing it to maybe a different experience. My local taqueria that has seafood options, those tend to be $5 per taco. Noting I live in Chicago, so it's a little bit higher price point, but there are other ways to do value.
Nacho fries has come back. Right? I remember when it first came out, it was one of the highest scoring items we'd ever seen in scores with immense appeal, and the value proposition only helped it further.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to show you just something real quick. So for all of you that remember basic stats, this is what a normal curve looks like. Standard, normal distribution, bell-shaped curve. And the idea is this is, just in nature or in the way things happen in the world, you'll often see a distribution like this. If we can go a step further, Claire, if we look at the 50,000 or so items that we've had scored in our scores platform, all the things that have launched on menus and consumers' reactions to them, and we look at one measure like purchase intent across those items, you get something that looks pretty much like that normal bell-shaped curve, that normal distribution that we would expect to see. But if you look at a metric like value, you get something quite different, right? Where you have a really long tail on the right-hand side. And that's driven primarily by price promotions and discounted items, but not entirely. And we wanted to run one more piece of analysis that would explain why the curve looks like this and what we can do to actually drive value perception. So we can go one slide forward. So this is a little more statistical, but we try to make it as simple as possible. We did a correlation of those tens of thousands of items between the price of those items and the perceived value by consumers for those items. So consumers rate each one of those items and have done so over time. The correlation you would expect to be negative, right? As the price goes up, the perceived value should probably go down. And the way a correlation coefficient works is it's going to be a number between -1 and +1.0. So here it makes sense, right? It's negative. It's a -0.55, which means that the correlation between price and value is negative, but it is not perfectly negative. It's not -1.0, it's -0.55. So value is, yes, of course, obviously about price, but there's other stuff that drives value too. There's that remaining 0.45 basically over here. So let's take a look. We then correlated value with purchase intent if you exclude price from the equation. And what you end up finding is that if people like an item more, they also value it more as well, right? When you even ignore the impact of price alone. And you just go back to a very simple formula on the next page, which is value equals benefit over price. And I think what we all want to sort of warn the industry against is there's going to be a very strong, I think, inclination to focus on that denominator price as the driver of value, We think, sure, you can do that, and you probably should do it in some cases, but the real winning strategy is to focus on what's in the numerator with benefit. How do you make those items more interesting, more appealing? How do you make your brand more interesting, more appealing, or offer a unique experience that you can't get somewhere else? That will drive value. And I think, Claire, you actually have some examples too, just, that we've seen in data or in your personal life as well.
Yep. So we also looked at our brand fingerprints tool to think about other ways we can position value, which is really important now. I actually looked at the trending of the correlation over time. And in the past 3 months, the importance of price is actually stronger. So like we need to be careful as an industry to not fall into that trap. And this is a good example of how that's not happened. So we have these chains and how consumers have thought about them for value for the dollar. And this looks at people who have been to them in the past 6 months. So they're, users of those chains. And it's people who rated it above average on value, or I think it's very good. Best in class it is. And the top two kind of make sense. Golden Corral and Shoney's, these are buffets. They should be a really good value for the dollar. That's the whole point. But the third one sort of surprised me when we look at full service restaurants. It was Rock Bottom Brewery, because when you really dig into it, they're actually a higher price point than lots of the other beer centric or brewery restaurants in our data. And what we found is that they also score low on value for LTOs. So value is coming from somewhere else. So I was starting to dig into what do they do well? What do we think this could be? Maybe it's, psychology and people rock bottom. They just assume it's rock bottom prices, but I think it's more likely that it's they do well on social gathering, which I think is a time frame where people are just not as concerned about price point versus their competitors. They're highly recommended. People say they're changing in a positive direction. So they've noticed changes to the menu and other things, and that actually is a positive of them. They have a strong speed of service and strong lunch offerings. And then this one was really strange to me. They actually, we asked about, is it best in class or whatever the other phrase was, very, very good or excellent for every single food item on the menu, category. And they do better than their competitors at every single thing except for what they're all about, which is beer. And that's partially, I think, because each place does their own beer and they're a brewery, and it would depend on how the brewer at that location is. But I think that's sort of interesting. As long as you have high quality food, people start to kind of ignore or forgive some of the other aspects.
I think that's the point. If you took this chart and we exposed all the names over here and we did a similar chart just based on average menu price point, the orders would not be the same, right? The value equation is coming from other stuff beyond just menu pricing. And that's the point. I know we're running short on time. So Claire?
Yeah, so this next one, I guess, thinking about another example of where value is very much not about price point. Anyone who knows me knows that I am a brewery fan. And so if we're talking about breweries, I was trying to think in my everyday life, what's like a terrible value, and yet we all seem to do it. It's a pain for the restaurant. It's super irritating. You actually don't get to taste the beer. Why do we all do this? And yet we do. This is from Pilot Project Brewing, kind of a couple miles up the road from me. And it's interesting because if you do their beers, in their classic 14.5 ounce draft, they're $7 to $9 each, so about 55 cents per ounce. But you can instead try 4 at a time, where you get 4-ounce drafts for $14.50, which is actually about 73 cents per ounce. Definitely not a value, definitely more about variety. And that's an example where time and time again, you will see that at breweries, people will choose that choice. So they have to build in some for the annoyance of serving them and the annoyance of cleaning them and the likelihood that drunk people steal small glasses. But at the same time, there's still some ounce difference there where there's no proper value. And then the last one, before we get into other stuff.
Every slice was a different flavor. Is that the food equivalent?
I guess so, yeah. If you did like the mini, sometimes they'll do pairings with like Girl Scout cookies, that would be another one. Or if you have like a sampler platter, that might be the food equivalent. And then this is like the classic experience one. This is my daughter. We went to one of those pop-up bars and we got this milkshake that I paid something like $15 for. It is not like those cool milkshakes that you see sometimes full of interesting ingredients or high quality cookies sticking out of it. It is pretty much just Lucky Charms on top of regular vanilla milkshake. But me and every single other person in that place paid $15 for this milkshake because we could post pictures of it and because there was lots of joy to be had and it was a special occasion. I think it's, again, those social gatherings and those special occasions, if you can get people to come in for those, they'll probably come back for another occasion.
I'm impressed that your daughter drinks Sam Adams.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
I liked that in the background too. That's an interesting choice.
Let's keep going. I think we're almost at time. You know, we have a whole piece on the art of the LTO. I think we should probably save this for next time. But there are some really powerful learnings on how to do an LTO better. So consider this a cliffhanger. We can just go to the last slide. As a reminder, please come and join us in 2 weeks, where I guess we will be talking about the art of the LTO. We had this whole thing planned for today, but we're going to share this next time instead, along with a bunch of other great stuff. So if you can just hit, take us all the way to the end. May 26th, in 2 weeks, noon Central, do not miss it. There is going to be a ton of content, plus you'll get the stuff that we couldn't make it through today, so it's almost like a 2-for-1. Tell everybody,